Welcome to the Whispers Through Time channel. Today we'll tell you the story of a spice merchant from medieval England. So, my name is Edmund Harrow, and if you were to ask the people of London what they know of me, they would not speak of my face, but of my goods. Pepper, they would say. Cinnamon. Cloves worth more than silver. And they would lower their voices, as if even naming such things might cost them coin. I was not born into wealth. No, men like me never are. Childhood. The smell of hunger. I was born in a narrow street not far from the Thames, where the air always carried the scent of rot, fish, and smoke. My father was a dock porter, his back bent before I ever learned to walk. My mother sold scraps, bits of bread, watered ale, whatever she could stretch into something resembling sustenance. We did not starve, but we lived close enough to hunger to know its breath. I remember watching ships. Not the great nobles' vessels, no, but merchant ships. Wide-bellied, heavy, groaning with goods from places I could not imagine. Men shouted in strange tongues. Crates were unloaded, cloth, wine, metal, and sometimes something else. I did not know what it was then, but I remember the smell. Warm, sharp, almost sweet. It cut through the stink of the docks like sunlight through fog. Spice, a sailor told me once, seeing me stare. Worth more than your whole street. That was the first time I understood something clearly. There were things in this world so valuable that men would cross oceans for them. And I decided, even as a boy, I would not spend my life carrying crates. I would own what was inside them. The first step upward I began as an errand boy. A merchant named Aldrich took me in, not out of kindness, but because I was quick and silent. I learned early that those who speak less hear more. His shop was small, but to me it was a palace. Shelves lined with jars. Cloth sacks tied with careful knots. Scales. Always scales, because everything had weight, and weight was worth. The first time he let me open a spice chest, I nearly lost my breath. Peppercorns spilled like black pearls into my hand. Careful, he snapped. That is coin you are holding. And he was right. Each grain was worth something. Each cent meant distance, heat, deserts, caravans, ships. I began to learn. Not just how to measure, but how to judge, how to tell good pepper from poor, how to smell rot before it spread, how to see deceit in a supplier's eyes. Because spice is not just trade. It is risk. The truth of trade, people believe merchants grow rich by chance. They are wrong. We grow rich by surviving what kills others. Ships sink. Caravans are robbed. Cargo spoils. Men lie. And sometimes, often, kings decide they want what you have. I learned quickly that coin alone is not enough. You must have information. Allies. Nerve. Aldrich taught me the first two. The third, I learned myself. My first deal. I was 19 when I made my first real gamble. A small shipment of pepper had arrived late. The market was thin, supply low, demand high. Aldrich hesitated. I did not. I used what little coin I had saved, and more than I should have risked, to buy a portion of it. Fool, he muttered. But I watched the market. Waited. Listened. And when the right buyer came, a noble household desperate for supply, I sold. At nearly double. That night, I did not sleep. Not from fear, but from realization. I had stepped across a line. I was no longer just a boy carrying goods. I was part of the game. Marriage and ambition. I married not for love, but for position. Her name was Margaret. Her father dealt in cloth, modest, but respectable. The marriage gave me access to better circles, better information. Do not misunderstand me. I came to respect her. She was sharp, far more than most men realized. She managed accounts with a precision I trusted more than my own. But love? Love is a luxury. And I had chosen ambition. Still, there were moments. Quiet evenings when she would sit beside the ledger, candlelight catching her face, and for a fleeting second I wondered what life might have been had I chosen differently. Expansion. The scent of power spice is not like grain or wool. It does not fill warehouses. It fills vaults. Small quantities. Immense value. That is its power. I began trading beyond London. First with ports along the coast. Then further. I formed connections with men who dealt with Venice and beyond that, lands I would never see. India. Arabia. Places of heat and color and danger. Every deal carried risk. Every shipment was a wager against storms, thieves, and fate itself. But with each success, my name grew. Enemies' success brings attention, and attention brings enemies. Other merchants whispered. Some tried to undercut me. Others tried to ruin me. One man, Thomas Grieve, attempted worse. He spread word that my spices were adulterated, mixed with dust, worthless. It nearly cost me everything. But I learned something important then. Truth matters less than belief. So I did not argue. I proved. Publicly. I opened my stock before buyers. Let them taste, smell, judge. And then I exposed him. Caught him in his own deceit. The market turned. And from that day on, men were more careful when speaking my name. Lost wealth does not shield you from loss. Margaret bore me 2 children, a son and a daughter. My son I raised to understand trade, numbers, risk, value. My daughter, she had her mother's mind. But illness does not care for potential. It came swiftly, took her within days. And for all my wealth, all my connections, all my power, I could do nothing. That is when I learned the cruelest truth of all. There are things no spice can buy. Where I stand now, I sit now in a house larger than I ever imagined as a boy. My stores are full. My name is known. Men bow when I pass. But I am not blind. I know what this life is. Every coin I hold rests on uncertainty. Every shipment may be the last. Every ally may become a rival. And yet, if you ask me whether I would choose differently, return to that boy on the docks, breathing in the scent of spice for the first time, I would not. Because in that moment I saw the world. Not as it was, but as it could be. There is a moment in every man's life when he stops climbing and begins defending what he has built. I did not notice when that moment came for me. Only that one day, I woke not thinking of opportunity, but of threat, the web beyond England. If you believe that I own my trade, you misunderstand the nature of spice. No man in England owns spice. We are merely the final link in a chain that stretches farther than most men can imagine. My pepper did not begin in London. It passed through hands in cities of stone and sun, through markets where languages tangled like threads. It crossed deserts on the backs of camels. It sailed seas where storms swallowed entire fleets. By the time it reached me, it had already survived a dozen dangers. And each step took its share. I came to understand that if I wished to grow further, I could not remain merely a buyer. I needed to reach deeper into the chain. Venetian letters. The first step was correspondence. Letters, carefully written, heavily sealed, sent through intermediaries to men in Venice. That city, even in stories, it felt unreal. A place where merchants were kings in all but name. They controlled much of the spice that entered Europe, and they did not welcome competition. At first, my letters went unanswered. Then one day, a reply came. Short, precise, expensive. They did not ask who I was. They asked what I could offer. That is when I realized something vital. In trade, identity matters less than usefulness. The first great risk. I committed more coin than ever before. Not to a shipment, but to a promise. Through intermediaries, I secured a partial stake in a cargo still far from England. Pepper, cinnamon, cloves, the finest grade. But there was a catch. There is always a catch. The route was longer, riskier. It would bypass certain established channels and certain powerful men. If it succeeded, my profits would be immense. If it failed, I would be ruined. Margaret saw the accounts. She said nothing at first. Then quietly, if this fails, we lose everything. Yes, I told her. And you still do it? I looked at the figures again and then at her. If I do not, I said, I remain what I am. And if you succeed, then I become something more. She studied me for a long moment, then nodded once. Then we risk it. That was why I trusted her. Not because she followed, but because she understood. Waiting. There is no agony like waiting on a ship you cannot see. Months passed. No word. Rumors came first. Storms in the South, piracy along certain routes, ships, delayed ships missing. Each whisper felt like a blade. I stopped sleeping well. Every knock at the door felt like judgment. And then, a letter arrived. Stamped. Sealed. Alive. The cargo had reached port. Not only intact, but early. Transformation. That single venture changed everything. The profits were beyond anything I had known before. I expanded rapidly. Larger storage. More agents. Wider networks. Men who had once dismissed me now sought my favor. Nobles began to notice. And that is when the true danger began. The court's shadow. Merchants like to believe we are independent. We are not. We exist at the pleasure of those with titles. At first, it was subtle. Requests. Favors. A noble household requiring supply, on terms not entirely fair. Then came demands. Taxes adjusted. Permissions required. Licenses questioned. I understood the message clearly. My success had made me visible. And visibility invites control. A dangerous patron. It was then that Lord Pembroke entered my life. A man of influence. Not the most powerful, but powerful enough. He summoned me, not invited. His hall was vast, cold, designed to remind men like me of our place. He spoke plainly. You trade in luxury, he said. I control access. A simple truth. Then he leaned forward. And I prefer my merchants loyal. He offered protection. In return, a share. Not small. Never small. I had a choice. Refuse and risk being crushed. Or accept and become bound. I accepted. Of course I did. Men who survive do not mistake pride for strength. The cost of protection. With his backing, my position solidified. No rival could easily challenge me. Routes opened. Restrictions eased. Profits grew. But I was no longer fully my own master. A portion of everything I earned now flowed elsewhere. And worse, I was drawn into matters beyond trade. Information. Favors. Quiet arrangements. I began to see how power truly worked. Not in proclamations, but in whispers. The fire. It happened in winter. Late. Cold enough that breath hung in the air. One of my storage houses caught fire. By the time it was discovered, it was too late. Flames consumed everything. Spice burns differently. The air filled with scent. Rich, overwhelming, almost beautiful. Cinnamon and clove carried on smoke. It would have been almost poetic, had it not been my fortune turning to ash. I stood in the street, watching it burn. And I knew. This was no accident. Reckoning. Loss sharpens the mind. I began asking questions. Quietly. Carefully. And I found the answer. Thomas Grieve. He had not forgotten. Men like him never do. But this time, I did not expose him publicly. No. I had learned. I took the matter elsewhere. Through channels that do not appear in ledgers. The result was final. He disappeared. No scandal. No noise. Just absence. I did not ask for details. And none were given. That was the day I understood fully. I was no longer just a merchant. Distance. Margaret noticed the change in me. How far will this go? She asked one evening. I did not answer immediately. Because I did not know. Or perhaps I did. And did not wish to say it aloud. There was a distance between us then. Not coldness. But something quieter. The cost of the path I had chosen. Reflection. I sometimes think back to the boy on the docks. To the first breath of spice. To the hunger. The simplicity. Life was hard then. But clear. Now everything is layered. Every deal carries unseen weight. Every ally a potential threat. And yet, I cannot turn back. Because men like me do not step out of the game. We are removed. Or we endure. I sit now surrounded by wealth greater than I once believed possible. But I understand something I did not as a boy. Spice is not merely a commodity. It is power. And power always demands a price. There comes a time when gold is no longer enough. I had wealth. More than the boy I once was could have imagined. More than most men in London would ever see in their lives. And yet, it bought me less freedom with each passing year. Because wealth draws power. And power draws politics. The king's need. War does not begin with swords. It begins with coin. Whispers reach the markets long before proclamations reach the streets. Tensions rising. Alliances shifting. Armies preparing. And with that, demand. Not just for grain and steel, but for spice. You see, nobles dine even in times of war. Perhaps especially then. They demand the same luxuries in uncertain times, as if taste itself could defy chaos. But more than that, spice preserves. It masks rot. It travels. It becomes essential. And so, men like me became necessary. Summoned again. This time, it was not Lord Pembroke. It was higher. A royal official, one who spoke not with authority of land, but of the crown itself. I was brought to a chamber far quieter than the halls of nobles. No banners. No display. Only purpose. You will supply, he said. Not a request. A statement. Quantities were named. Prices adjusted. Not fairly. Never fairly. But refusal was not an option. Because this was no longer about trade. This was about obligation. The illusion of choice. I agreed. Of course I did. But I learned then the most dangerous truth of all. The higher you rise, the fewer choices you truly have. I arranged shipments, diverted stock, delayed other buyers. And in doing so, I made enemies. Not petty rivals, but men with reach. Men who did not forget losses. A game of balances. To survive, I became something else. Not just a merchant, but a balancer. I supplied the crown. But quietly, I continued trade elsewhere. Carefully. Indirectly. Never enough to be called treason, but enough to remain independent. Every decision became a calculation. Who must be satisfied? Who can be delayed? Who can be deceived? Because pleasing one power often meant angering another. And anger has consequences. The letter I should not have received. One evening, a sealed letter arrived. No markings. No sender. Inside, a single message. You supply the wrong side. No name. No accusation beyond that. But it was enough. Because in those words was a warning. Or a threat. Or both. I burned the letter. But not the thought. Margaret's voice. That night, Margaret spoke more plainly than she had in years. This will end badly, she said. For whom? I asked. She held my gaze. For everyone who believes they are in control. I almost smiled at that. Because I knew she was right. And yet, what was I to do? Withdraw? Disappear? Men like me are not allowed such endings. Pressure. The demands increased. Faster deliveries. Greater quantities. Lower prices. At the same time, routes grew more dangerous. Ships delayed. Cargo lost. Rumors of seizure. It became clear. Others were watching me. Testing me. Perhaps even hunting for weakness. A visit in the night. He came without announcement. A man I did not know. Well-dressed, but not a noble. Calm, but not harmless. You are overextended, he said, as if discussing the weather. I said nothing. You serve one master too openly, he continued. And others take notice. Who are you? I asked. He ignored the question. You must learn discretion, he said, or you will be removed. Not threatened. Stated. As fact. Then he left. No name. No explanation. But his meaning was clear. Understanding the game. That was the moment everything became clear. I was not being pulled in one direction. I was being pulled in many. The crown. The nobles. Foreign interests. Rival merchants. All watching. All measuring. All ready to act. And I stood in the middle. Adaptation. So I changed. Again. I reduced visibility. Shifted trade through intermediaries. Let others appear to rise, while I stepped back, just enough to avoid notice. I learned to speak less, reveal less, control more quietly. Power, I realized, is strongest when unseen. The cost. But such a life has a cost. Distance grows, not just from enemies, but from everything, even family. Margaret and I spoke less of business, more of silence. My son began to take on responsibilities, and I saw in him something familiar. Ambition. Sharp. Uncompromising. I wondered then, if I had given him a gift, or a burden, the edge of ruin. It nearly ended one winter. A shipment, large, critical, failed to arrive. No word. No explanation. Too much depended on it. Too many promises made. Too many powerful men expecting delivery. For the first time in years, I felt something I had not allowed myself to feel. Fear. Not of loss, but of collapse. Because I knew how quickly fortunes turn. How swiftly a man can go from indispensable to disposable. A realization. In those long nights of waiting, I came to understand something I had resisted for years. I was no longer building anything. I was maintaining, defending, surviving. The climb was over. What remained was endurance. Where this path leads. If you think this story is one of triumph, you are mistaken. This is not a tale of a man who conquered the world. It is the tale of a man who entered it and could not leave. I still trade. I still negotiate. I still calculate every move. But I do so now with clear eyes, knowing that every gain is temporary, every alliance fragile, every position borrowed. And sometimes, in the quiet, I remember that first scent. Warm, sharp, full of promise. And I wonder, if I had turned away that day, would I have lived a smaller life? Yes, but perhaps a freer one. Narrated by Edmund Harrow. There is a strange quiet that comes at the end of a long life. Not silence. No, the world never grants that. There are still carts in the streets, still voices in the markets, still the distant call of ships along the river. But the quiet comes from within, from knowing that what once drove you forward no longer holds the same power. The slowing of time. I no longer rise before dawn, not because I cannot, but because there is no need. Others rise now. Others carry the weight. My son moves through my warehouses with confidence, his voice firm, his decisions quick. Men listen to him as they once listened to me. He has learned well. Too well, perhaps. He sees numbers as I did. Opportunity. Expansion. Leverage. But I wonder, does he yet see the cost? Margaret. Time has changed us both. Margaret's hair has silvered. Her hands, once so steady over ledgers, now rest more often than they work. But her mind remains sharp. Sharper than mine, some days. We sit together more now. Not speaking of trade. Not speaking of strategy. But of smaller things. Memories. Regrets. Once, not long ago, she asked me, was it worth it? Such a simple question. Such a dangerous one. I did not answer immediately, because to answer too quickly would have been a lie. What was gained? I have known wealth. Comfort beyond my beginnings. Respect. Influence. I have walked in halls where men like my father would never have been allowed to stand. I have shaped outcomes. Moved goods across continents without ever leaving England. I have built something that will outlive me. These are not small things. They are not meaningless. What was lost? But there are other measures. Moments not taken. Time not given. A daughter buried too soon. A wife who stood beside me, but often at a distance I created. A life lived always in calculation, never in rest. I cannot say I regret my path, but I cannot say I do not mourn what it cost me. Both truths sit side by side, as they often do. The final lesson. In my younger years, I believed spice was power, and I was not wrong. It opens doors, commands attention, bends men. But now, at the end, I see more clearly. Spice is not power. It is a key, and like all keys, it opens doors that cannot easily be closed. The last walk. I still walk, when the weather allows it. Slowly now, through the streets that once felt enormous. Past the docks where it all began. The smell is the same. Salt, smoke, rot, and sometimes, faint, but unmistakable. Spice. I stand there longer than I should. Watching the ships. Watching the boys running errands, just as I once did. I see it in them. That hunger. That spark. The belief that the world is something to be taken. I do not stop them. I do not warn them. Because I know. They would not listen. I would not have. The passing. The ledgers are no longer mine. The decisions no longer rest in my hands. My son has taken the trade fully. He moves faster than I ever did. Takes risks I no longer would. The world is changing. It always is. And men like him will shape what comes next. As I once did. The closing monologue. So now I sit, with more years behind me than ahead. And I ask myself, as Margaret once asked me, was it worth it? If you measure a life in coin, then yes. If you measure it in influence, then yes. If you measure it in survival, then certainly. But if you measure it in something quieter, something harder to hold, then the answer is not so simple. Because a man may gain the world he dreamed of, and still wonder what lay beyond the path he chose. I was a boy who smelled spice and saw possibility. I became a man who chased it across years, across risks, across loss. And in the end, I did not conquer it. I carried it. All its weight, all its cost, all its consequence. And yet, if I were to stand once more on those docks, a boy again, with nothing but hunger and that first breath of something rare and distant, would I turn away? No, I would step forward. Every time. Final words. This is my life. Not a tale of heroes. Not a legend. But a truth. A man who reached beyond his place and paid the price to remain there. Remember that, if you ever smell something rare in the air, something that promises more. Because some paths do not begin with a step, but with a single breath. And once taken, they never truly release you.